not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Bostonred here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psychology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Bostonred, peace out.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network, this is Friday Jobber on the first day of December 2017. As we move through the final month of 2017, we're here. We'll start with the people from the University of Virginia. That is Larry Sabato's shop, Dr. Sabato. We'll plug a couple of books here and fall back on them for some political science. We like to do a little of that around here occasionally. We do quite a bit in terms of poll interpretation. On, I believe it was last night's show, we did the JT Analytics poll in Alabama. Judge Moore is up by 6 points in that particular poll, with about a 3.4 3.5 margin of error there, so we can say that he is up. I was listening earlier today while we were doing some coding. The minister from Chicago, loved by many and not so much by some others, Minister Louis Farrakhan. He was speaking at the Watergate Hotel on the 16th of November in Washington, D.C. He had some interesting things to say about the Trump administration, DJ Trump being a transparent president, and tracing the saga of African Americans from, as he said, Tricky Dicky to Slick Willie. Slick Willie being Clinton, Tricky Dick being Richard Nixon. That's be what, basically 1968. I get it right. Remember, can't forget Tricky Dick. And Slick Willie in 1992-93, actually, when Slick started his term out. He is the husband of Hillary the Monster Clinton, otherwise known as Crooked Hillary. Anyway, a cast of characters there, but outlining DJ Trump and his transparency, what he has talked about, the reaction of the Trump voters that elected DJ Trump, and their payback supposedly for the election of Barack Obama in 2008. 2009, he moved into the White House. He was there for 8 years. It's kind of interesting in that he recounts this from both a social and a political perspective there as it relates to African Americans, and of course also to the European working class, and world geopolitics in the Democratic Republic of Korea, and how plans were drawn up. General Wesley Clark, for those who remember, you probably hear about his son. Wesley Clark was from Arkansas. He ran for president there. He was a general. He was the commander during the Bosnian War, the NATO commander, General Clark. But nonetheless, he had seen plans that the U.S. had drawn up to destabilize and disintegrate 5 Arab countries, Libya being one. And of course, the cheerleader for the intervention in Libya was none other than Hillary Rodham Clinton. And the ultimate murder of the leader assassination, what do you want to call it, Muammar Gaddafi, a friend of Minister Farrakhan, and of many people in African countries from Niger across the continent, because he had not only facilitated them in terms of education, in terms of industry or development, as you call it. So that was some of the reach there, and of course where the hot spots are today in Syria and in Afghanistan, the minerals that have been found in Afghanistan. That's the reason that you have several thousand U.S. troops in Afghanistan, because one time Afghanistan was thought not to have anything. But there are some mineral deposits there and some oil. There's also petroleum product in the Golan Heights. So that brings the Zionist regime into the Golan area there. They're there for a reason. And, of course, the people that are pointed out as targets, the Islamic Republic there, to get a war going, a proxy war, basically, between the Sunnis, the Saudis and various others, and the Shias. And that has been the tour that DJ Trump took to Saudi Arabia and offered them weapons. Now, he was selling these weapons. He was, quote-unquote, the sales in cheap for the military-industrial complex. They did sign agreements to buy some weaponry, but, of course, they also buy weaponry from the Russian Federation, etc. So those are targets on their back, Islamic Republic. And now with the new transition, we'll get to this, Mr. Tillerson will be, as they say, exiting, because his sin was calling DJ Trump a moron. And they will move that character hack that used to be a representative in Kansas, Pepro, to be the Minister of State or Secretary of State, whatever you want to call him. He's now the CIA director. So that tells you basically where it is. And move Tom Cotton-picking, Cotton, a senator. It's very unusual when you have a senator, that's a rumor, to be at the CIA. Cotton made his mark as a captain in the Army during the second campaign, Baghdad campaign, etc. A tall, rangy fellow, looks like a basketball player more than a senator, and probably has the mentality of a junior college type. But nonetheless, it would be the new administration. Is it much more dangerous for the world? Yes, it's much more hawkish. Mad Dog Mathis is the Secretary of Defense. You get that group together there, and they will look at the Islamic Republic, look at the Democratic Republic of Korea as some possible targets. Now, the Islamic Republic has a respectable army in the Mideast section there, and in Syria, backed up by the Russian Federation. Now, the Russian Federation has their rocket forces, the way that they configure it. That is their air forces, their missile forces, whether they be on land, sea, or whatever. They're all involved there. They have naval bases in Syria now, and so everyone is digging in. And when you get to the Democratic Republic of Korea, there is China. China is a well-developed, has a well-developed capacity, I should say, in terms of their rocket forces. So in other words, you're getting into a situation much more important than, believe it or not, the sexual deal. When we move out of here, we have a little canned presentation out of Detroit, Michigan, on Representative Conyers, the longest serving representative in the Congress. He's 88 years old, and we actually have the woman that made allegations. She signed a lawsuit. I think it's $27,000, not much, but Representative Conyers is not a wealthy man. He was at public service and not at, as they say, the public pig pen, whatever you want to call it, not in the swamp. And she did work there. She has allegations of what the representative did to her a few years in the past. And so you can listen to that, and you can go to the video at one of the actually at NBC. It is there. Lisa Bloom is there, who incidentally used to be represent Harvey Weinstein. This sort of tells you where these characters are. She represented Harvey Weinstein, and when she got shamed, she had to let Harvey go, and now she was there with this particular person. But as we said last night, we'll look at sort of a gauge of what's going on with Judge Roy Moore in Alabama. It appears that the great pool of undecided voters and voters that are out of the normal circumference are coming into that race, and that's why you see a few additional points moving towards Judge Moore. Now, what will come of this whole situation here, this fascination, as Minister Farrakhan called the gropers reaching out, and he was doing a satirical thing here. That he said, well, in the House, if they, that's House of Representatives, they asked for raising hands, all the hands would go up if they were gropers. And he went on even to the first President Bush, George H.W. Bush. He was a groper too. But that's beside the point. The more important element there is, what are they going to do with the nuclear weapons if they go into war? Now, there are all kinds of things out there in terms of they have spent billions of dollars on a so-called nuclear safety net for the U.S. But from what I've seen, 15 to 20% of any missiles could fly through. Now, that doesn't include what would happen with Seoul. It would be in trouble. And what would happen in Tokyo with all those earthquake faults there. So in other words, what would happen would be you could cause a worldwide depression. That's what you're not supposed to do with a war. The idea there is to come out with an economic advantage, or at least at set zero, where you don't do economically. Now, wars are obviously fought on a political grounds. And this administration doesn't understand that with these third-rate generals that he has, McMaster's, Mad Dog Mathis, this fool Kelly, who had been in the military for 40 years and never won a war. So you have those kinds of characters around there. With DJ Trump as the ringmaster, you have major problems of miscalculation, undercalculation, expanding a war in the Mideast, where you go from Syria to the the Islamic Republic there, all the way to the Golan Heights. And then you introduce all sorts of other things in there, and it all boils down to, if you have a war in the Mideast, who is going to pay for the war? The Zionists can't fly their planes on the cheap, and the U.S. military would have to bring in additional troops, etc. all of that in the aftermath of the tax campaign. There's roughly a $30 trillion deficit out there. Some say 20, doesn't matter. Either we'll do it on this show or we'll do it on the week that was. We'll get into the Joint Tax Committee. They have some materials there. But let me now go to the University of Virginia. First, we'll plug these books. The Surge is one book. That's by Dr. Sabato, Kyle Klondike, and Jeffrey Skilling. The Surge, 2014's big GOP win and what it means for the next presidential election. I thought we had a 2016 here. Anyway, and another book here, The House in Midstream, U.S. Midterm Elections and Their Consequences. This is by Mr. Bush, Andrew Bush, Horses in the Midstream. Anyway, those are two that are plugged here. And so, let's see, I wrote, okay. The Surge, I'm not sure. But he had a recent document out. Anyway, nonetheless, this is by Kyle Klondike. He's a managing editor at the Crystal Ball. Practically speaking, though the House Democrats might have to root for the other party in 2016. This whole theme, the party in the White House will lose seats, but how nominally it happens. Well, in recent times, because of the incumbent factor, the party usually loses less seats. Now, an exception to that rule, most recent exception to that rule, was the election in 2010, 2014, where the Republicans took over. We didn't see many House Democrats. Okay. We know that that's been a broken record to point to the president's party. A midterm, no doubt about it. And this is what we were talking about. Less now because of the incumbent factors where I wanted to get to. We're a little bit past the halfway point between the last national election in 2016 and the next one in 2018. The president's approval rating course consistently at, we had just looked at his, he's at 36. Gallup has been the premier organization tracking the presidential numbers. They gave up on the presidential polls and they went in that direction. Nonetheless, for the generic ballot, the Democrats have been ahead on it. But again, this goes back to a timing factor. We talked about what happened in Alabama with the revelations on Judge Moore. They came too early in the cycle. We used to have what they call October surprise in late October. The idea was if you came up with something like what happened with Judge Moore, whether it be fact or fiction, it would influence the race. But what has happened down there, things have stabilized, and its influence on the race will be minimal at this time. And also you have these number of harassment allegations coming out. The work of O'Keefe there with his booby trap, so to speak. So you get into a lot of fake news. A lot of people just don't know. And in the case of Representative Conyers, it'll go to a House committee. In the case of Al Franken, they've started an investigation in the Senate. And I assume from what old man McConnell has said, if Mr. Moore should appear in D.C., they will start an investigation of him. What good will it do? He's been expelled before. Okay, so going on here, special election results, along with state elections in New Jersey and in Virginia. Now, Jersey is a different state. Virginia has turned a little from a red state to what they call a purple state, now moving more blue. Jersey, there's no excuse. They had Tutan Christie there. But you have to look at the makeup of Jersey. A lot of small towns. The largest city there is, about 300,000. A little over that is Newark, New Jersey, under the administration of Mr. Baraka. And they finally got rid of that sellout former Twitter king, J.D. Trump has taken over that position. Cory Booker. Anyway, and the rest of Jersey is a bunch of small little towns packed with a bunch of people that work on Wall Street. And there's a working class element there also that played into Teuton Christie. Although there hasn't been, has not yet been a mass exit from the Republican Party. Swing seats, several incumbents, vulnerable seats are calling it quits. And Ian Ross Layton in Florida, she's been around for a long time. Trout in Michigan's 11. Frank Labando in New Jersey. Charlie Dean in Pennsylvania, 15. David Rachel in Washington, that's 8th out in Washington. They are all retiring. Additionally, Martha McSally, she's in Arizona representative. She's going to run for the Senate. Apparently, likely they're removing another quality incumbent by the Republicans. So again, they will be out there. In Jersey too, Jeff Van Drew, one Democrats have wanted to run for years is running. So some toss-up races there. And let's see. Beneath the surface of the Democrats is very impressive, but showing, of course, in Virginia. Well, no doubt about that. That gains in the House of Delegates, that's the lower house, were exclusively limited to districts carried by the monster. But winning a vast majority of Clinton won GOP-held House districts won't be enough. There are just 23 of those. The Democrats will almost certainly have to win several Trump-won seats to win the House back. And that's a tall order now, but again, those other factors we talked about, and let's just run down this. There's Don Young. He's out in Alaska. They say safe Republican. It'll probably be safe Republican until he goes to the other side, as they say, quite literally. Arizona 9th. It is open. Likely Democrat out there. Jim Acosta, they moved that to safe Democrat in California, 16. Royce in California said leans Republican, likely Republican there. Ed Rossi. Mimi Waters, that's in California, 45, leans Republican. And not sure. Charlie the Tuna Chris in Florida, 13, used to be the governor there. Anyway, likely Democrat, they moved it there. Diaz Ballard in Florida, 25, safe Republican. He's been around for a long time. Mike Bose, leans Republican. That is in Illinois, 12. Must be way downstate. Pete Ruskin, leans Republican. That's 6 in Illinois down there. B. Snyder, safe Democrat, that's Illinois 10. Kansas 2 is open, leans Republican. Rick Nolan, Minnesota 8 for toss-up there. He's had 2 close races with the multi-millionaire. Ted Budd, that's North Carolina 13, likely Republican there. George Holding, another North Carolina 2, likely Republican. Robert Pittenger, that's North Carolina 9th, likely Republican there. And in Jersey 5, Gottemir, likely Democrat there. Donovan, that's New York 11. It's going to be in upstate New York. John Faso. There's a toss-up, that's New York 19. Claudine Tierney. 20, New York 22, another toss-up Republican there. Culberson, that's in Texas, leans Republican. An open seat in 21, likely Republican, that's in Texas. Mina Young, she's out in Meyer Young. She's out in Utah. Leans Republican. Is an African. Anyway, Scott Taylor, that's Virginia 2, leans Republican, and Groffman in Wisconsin 6, likely Republican. What's safe? They moved that. So those are some of the changes in their ratings. And then we have these Republican ones here. Won't go over those. It's too many to bend. Some of the Democrats we talked about. Toss-ups, Nolan in Minnesota 8, Minnesota 1. That Waltz has, he's running for governor. Another opener in New Hampshire. Rosen in Nevada. Those are toss-up ones. Leans Democrat. Horan in Arizona 1. Berra in California 7. Murphy in Georgia 7. An open seat in Florida 21. And some others here. I think we went over most of those. Sherry Buttos in Illinois. Peterson in likely, and Costa in New Hampshire. Goffenmeyer in New Jersey, and so forth and so on. Those are likely Democrats there. Those toss-up seats are going to be kind of interesting. One is down in southern parts of Minnesota, in northern Minnesota, more working-class districts that DJ Trump did well in. Let me just conclude this up here. Safe Democrat to like a Democrat, that is Arizona 8. Arizona, let me see here. Yeah. Jeff Flake. There, he'll be, he's retiring, so you have some retirements here. The Phoenix mayor, let's see who is running there. A naval doctor, Steve Ferrara. Wait a minute here. But the Republicans are holding out hopes that their preferred candidate there, the mayor of Phoenix, Greg Stanton, is a likely Democratic nominee. He should be able to hold a seat there. And let me just get to a swing district, which is drawn after the 2010 census. The district is trending blue. Clinton won it by 16 points after Barack Obama carried it by only 4 in 2012. This is the open seat, Arizona 8. There in Arizona. So some of the seats here, the conclusion, there's still a long time. And this is one of I had a little apprehension even about going into this because, again, there's a long time that we have out there before the 2018 election. Many things that could happen, particularly geopolitically. Now, as far as the tax bill, it is stuck. They're dealing with the deficit. They'd hope to get it finished up tomorrow. Who knows what they'll do with the Republicans. But it has a severe consequence. We'll get that in a minute. Anyway, this is overall our ratings list. 224 seats safe. Likely are leaning to the Republicans. 191 safe or likely leaning to the Democrats. 20 are toss-ups. So in other words, for safe government, let's say the Democrats can win 2/3 of the toss-ups, that's 13, and otherwise let's assume that the other seats go to the current party. The Democrats would have 10 seats, closer to the 24 seats that they need, so but they'd still be 14 seats short. And one of the problems there with the Republican Party, one time you had a somewhat moderate sector of Republicans like Edward Dirksen, etc., from Illinois. But you don't basically have much of that anymore. What you have now is you have some fiscal hawks that come in and sometimes, like Jones out of, South Carolina, whatever, that come in and counter the Freedom Party caucus. So again, it's up in the air. Doesn't make much sense. Let me start with the Washington Post here and work my way around. Tillerson, we already talked about the machinations involved there. A jury out in San Francisco found a Latino from Mexico not guilty in a peer killing there. This one, DJ Trump, called it disgraceful. The shooting of Stimley, I guess. Anyway, that was in the primary there. No wonder people in our country are so angry with illegal immigration. Well, it doesn't make much sense. Evidently, this man, Jose Garcia Zareta. Anyway, had been deported 5 times and was wanted for his 5th deportation. And evidently, he had a gun and it dropped and killed a woman. San Francisco is a sanctuary city. Garcia, a hapless homeless man who killed a woman in a freak accident. Evidently there, denied shooting her, said it was an accident. And the jury, basically what this went was, the jury did find him guilty of being a felon in possession of a handgun, meaning he not only had a handgun, but there was no intention for him to hurt or shoot anyone. That's what public defender said. Adachi, which carries a potential sentence, 16 months to 3 years behind the bar. The verdict comes in today. Was not the one we were hoping for there. That was spoken for the prosecutor's office. The jury came back with a verdict. They did, and we respect their decision. The Stensley family then showed incredible resolve during the whole process. The family was saddened and shocked by the verdict. That's what he told the San Francisco Chronicle. So let's see, are we missing anything in this? Politics did come out in the trial. Extensive testimony from ballistics experts. Defense attorneys argued that Garcia Zarate was hapless, a homeless person, had a freak accident there. He was an accident, he said. So he had a federal prison sentence for illegally re-entering the country, and had been transferred to San Francisco jail in 2015 to face a 20-year charge for selling marijuana. The sheriff released him a few days later after prosecutors dropped the marijuana charge. They normally have these charges there that are bogus, period. Federal judge recently blocked, this is a sanctuary city issue in California counties of San Francisco, Santa Clara. This is the Department of Justice will continue to ensure that all jurisdictions places safety. Anyway, that's a bunch of hooey there. They make these into political cases, and the defense attorney said in his closing arguments that he knows it's difficult to believe, but Garcia Zareta found an object that turned out to be a weapon, which fired when he picked it up. It's possible. Ballistic experts testified the bullet ricocheted about 15 feet. That has happened before. I've known of cases that's happened where Zareta was setting and then traveled another 80 feet. It is 24 meters before striking Stiletti in the back and piercing her heart. Oh boy. The gun was stolen from an SUV of a Bureau of Land Management ranger that was parked in San Francisco, the city plagued by an epidemic of car burglaries in each recent year. So that's how the gun got stolen, the gun got dropped, and Garcia Gazzetta is said the 16 months to 3 years, so he's going away for a while, and that will be that. Today's show grapples. We talked about Matt Lauer. That is kind of a waste of time there. He sent out a statement saying that he There are no words to express my sorrow and regrets for the pain that I caused others by word and action. Anyway, he's out of the case. Whereas Garrison Keillor has come under fire. Was fired from the Minnesota Public Radio Station, and they are cleansing his record, as they say, the historic record there. And we have another one. Hip-hop mogul Richard Simmons stepped down from his companies on Thursday after a woman alleged he sexually assaulted her, which he strongly disputes. So, I mean, the gropers, the sexual assaults that go on. What else have we got here? Oh, well. Oh, this is something from Variety. What he did and what's going on there. And Richard Simmons, I didn't know he was involved in something. Stepped down, an essay published by the Hollywood Reporter, so and so on, that forced her to go to his apartment. Oh, this is in 1991. Her account follows last week's Time story in which Carrie Clausen alleged that when she was a 17-year-old model, Simmons sexually assaulted her while the director Brent Ratner watched. So we have another situation going on here. But once in the car, she wrote Simmons told the driver. Anyway, I'm getting all what happened here. This will come out. Was an account. Who was this by? Anyway, it follows. Simmons has presented himself as an activist who promotes mindfulness, yoga, and various other causes. Activist for his chair of the Foundation for Ethical Understanding, while promoting relationships among Jews, Muslims, and the African American community, and served as a goodwill ambassador. His companies has said he will convert his into a non-profit center for healing. And anyway, that's Richard Simmons. We'll follow that story and see where he is going. We've already covered Mr. Tillerson. And let's go to ESPN, then we'll... This is from the National Basketball League last night. The Cavaliers were in Atlanta. Cavaliers 121-114. The Flyers were in Boston, and 108 Celtics to 97 for the Flyers of Philadelphia. The Bulls were in Denver, 111-110. Can't get closer than that. Nuggets. The Bucks were out in Oregon. Bucks 103-91. Hadn't seen them win very much. And finally, the Jazz were in Los Angeles, 126-107 over the Clippers. So that is that part of the story. And the polling today, DJ Trump at 36. That's from Gallup. Rasmussen's had him at 42 forever. And a sad story here. The founder of African American psychology, Joseph L. White. I'm sure that Professor Hare will have comments on this. Out of Irvine, California, he was a psychiatrist, social activist, and a college professor. Pioneered the field of African American psychology to counter what he saw as rampant ignorance and prejudice in the profession. He died. He was 84 years old. He lived in Irvine. Died of a heart attack on the 21st near Chicago during a flight to St. Louis to see his daughter for Thanksgiving. He was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, grew up in 1932, grew up in Minneapolis, enrolled in San Francisco State College in 1950 after working his way west as a waiter on a passenger train. Earned his Ph.D. from Michigan State University in 1962 when John F. Kennedy was president, becoming one of a handful of African Americans in the nation to hold a doctorate in clinical psychology. Professor Nathaniel Hare also has one. When I left the program, I was what you call a black Anglo-Saxon. I was the nicest Negro you could ever want to see, but prejudice changed him into a militant Negro. He recalls. With a white and free children, he tried to find a house or an office in Long Beach, California. But he was repeatedly turned down despite having a college education and having performed a military service. In the midst of the civil rights movement in the 60s, White campaigned for what is now known as cross-cultural psychology that took into account the perspectives and needs of ethnic minorities in 1968. White, then dean of undergraduate studies at San Francisco State, and other African American. They use black. We'll change this. Anyway, this is a paper out of Albany. It's an AP thing. Formed the Association of Black Psychologists. They were angry at the way mainstream psychology took what they considered a white or European Western view that ignored and misunderstood African American culture and lifestyle. The field was dominated by a prejudiced view of African Americans. Finally got that. Psychology is a part of America. African people are invisible in America. They're invisible in psychology, White said in the interview for the association in 2008 convention. In America, African people are considered to be inferior, dumb, slow, childlike. Same things in psychology about how African Americans have low IQs, can't do complex tasks, he said, and how the hell did this happen? He argues that, for instance, Eurocentric psychology misunderstood African American spirituality and views of time and emphasis on a collective behavior. Especially, Joe was critical of traditional psychology's ignorance in a belief that it was the norm against which people and their culture should be measured, and telling African Americans that you can't seek validation from people who are oppressed. This is said Thomas A. Harmon, a past associate president and vice chancellor of student affairs at UC Irvine. White called for African Americans to found a psychology field of their own. He popularized the idea in a 70s article in Ebony magazine, and becoming known amongst colleagues as the father of black psychology. And this was later adopted by women and gays and other ethnic minorities, as we call them, oppressed national minorities. White also kept a clinical practice for decades, mentoring many psychology students. He also worked on education projects to provide equal opportunity for minority students. In 1968, he helped found the California Education Opportunity Program, which was expanded to all state college campuses, and has provided financial aid, tutoring, counseling, and other help to thousands of low-income and educationally disadvantaged students. Dr. White was a renowned scholar and remembered by his for his pioneering work in clinical psychology. But like all great professors, his most enduring contribution is that he touched so many lives as a mentor and a teacher, a family friend. Condoleezza Rice wrote that. Unbelievable, but she did in fact do it. Joseph L. White, dead at 82 years of age. We'll have his picture up there for you to see. This will do it for us on a Friday Jobber on the 1st of December, 2017. Tomorrow we have the week that was on the Bostonred part of the Bostonred Network and WBRN Radio. And we'll have Numbers Man. That is our macroeconomic program. Economics, I guess. We'll be talking about GMP. Over 3% for the last quarter, the revised, and we'll be talking about other things that has happened. We'll also touch on robotics, one of our favorite subjects, and how it will displace jobs in the coming years, and the drive by GM to move into the robotic, or what they call autonomous automobiles, self-driving autos. These would be self-driving taxis. So watch out for the Uber gig economy. As quickly as they can get the robot in there, the self-driving cars, that gig economy will start to disappear. Those some of the machinations are coming up. And also on our other channels, we now have the addition of the program called BR on the World, which our international political / news program is now called Bostonred on the News on the World. So what we're trying to do is consolidate all of our programs onto the Bostonred network and WBRN radio. We are moving in that direction. Now, Numbers Man, you can find that also on many of the same channels, including iHeartRadio. They're all there. And so is Bostonred on the World is now at iHeart. Just got approval this week of there. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 programs there, and you can find them also. You can find them also at Stitcher. On the YouTube channel. We're building up the YouTube channel. We're building up some of these other channels as we move along here. And we'll be back, incidentally, on live stream shortly here of this month. We'll start live streaming some of our programs where you get a little more visual there. And we'll put some of that material on YouTube as we move to more of a modular system. Also this weekend, we'll have another open source report. We've started working on it. About 50% of it is done. We're going to have more open source reports in December to make up for the tardiness early in the year. We still have all the politics running here, but things are starting settling down. We'll see where the tax bill goes this month. If they get it out, that'll be the big one. And the next year they'll work on other things like so-called welfare reform. Those kinds of things will bring their ugly head up. Nonetheless, have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the week that was, and then the Monday morning quarterback, where we talk about the talk shows and other things, sports. And we're coming out in December with a new sports program called All About Sports, which is the economics of sport. We'll get that one up as quickly as we can.
Shortness of breath, lightheaded, and dizziness. Congressman Conyers, give them to you as they come to me. I also would like to address Nancy Pelosi's statement, which I'm sure all of you all are aware of at this juncture, calling on the congressman to resign. First of all, it is not up to Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi did not elect the congressman, and she sure as hell won't be the one to tell the congressman to leave. That decision will be completely up to the congressman. He's not thought about that. He's thinking about his health. He's thinking about getting well. That is the main focus of the family. They would ask for their privacy at this time while he is being treated. He is still in the hospital as we speak. There are, to my count, 5 of these allegations against Al Franken. There are 3 or 4 against the congressman. At the end of the day, I would suspect that Nancy Pelosi is going to have to explain what is the discernible difference between Al Franken and John Conyers. That is a question that she is going to have to answer. And again, he is not going to be pressured what his next course is. That will not be today. That will not be tomorrow. The congressman, again, is concerned about his health, just as his family.
Along with her attorney, Lisa Bloom. It was the first time that she has spoken out, and we began by asking her how it felt to be coming forward publicly.
Well, it's a sad day. I don't feel good, but I feel determined and I feel purposeful. I felt compelled to stand up and speak out, to be a voice behind, these allegations that I made, I want everyone to know it was serious. I did it 3 years ago, and Congressman Conyers came out and called me a liar, basically. So I'm here to say that I'm not a liar.
There was a settlement that was paid, and that's the revelation that came out, and that's how it is that people in the public became aware that these allegations were out there. Can you tell me what you say John Conyers did when you were his employee?
Yes. Some of the things that he did were, it was sexual harassment, violating my body, propositioning me, inviting me to hotels with the guise of discussing business, and then proposition me to, for sex. And he's just violated my body. He has touched me in different ways, and it was very uncomfortable and very unprofessional.
You describe a course of conduct over the 11 years that you worked for him. In particular, I know there was a time in 2005 you say you were in a Chicago hotel room. Can you tell me what happened?
Well, it was the same kind of thing. He invited me into the hotel, and he has undressed, down to his underwear. And again, it was the proposition of sexually satisfying him. And
he asked you to do something sexually?
Yes. He asked me to satisfy him sexually. He pointed to areas of genital areas of his body and asked me to, touch it.
And what did you do in that moment?
I was frozen, shocked, and I didn't know what to do. But one thing, I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want to upset him, and I just and then also he asked me to find other people that would satisfy him. So I just tried to escape, and I live in Chicago, so I just told him I had to leave and go somewhere else. But I did try to. I just didn't know what to do. I just was frozen, and I did tell him that I was not going to do that, and I didn't feel comfortable.
You've said that something like this happened more than once?
Yes, over the years, it's happened, and during the years of, say, around 2010, when his wife was away, it got worse. I would get phone calls asking for me to come to hotels, and and different things like that. So this continued on throughout the years.
Did you ever tell any of your superiors?
Yes, there was a time when I reported to who was the chief of staff at that time in Detroit, and so he was my boss.
And what was the response?
He said he would talk to the congressman about it. He felt that he didn't challenge me in disbelief. He said he would talk to the congressman about his behavior, and then I didn't see any change because it continued after that.
Did the chief of staff ever then follow up on you and say, hey, I had that conversation, here's what came of it? Was there any further action as far as you know?
No, he did tell me he had talked to him, but it was up to him, but there was no other action formally,
Marion, what you describe is obviously extremely disturbing and inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And I know there will be people watching who say, okay, but you worked for him for 11 years. Mm-hmm. 11 years. Why didn't you go? Why did you stay?
I enjoyed my job. The congressman is a civil rights icon. When it comes to things he's done, I came to him and worked on prisoner reentry, which is very important, to me. A single mother with 4 kids, I had to raise my kids. I got gratification in the job, servicing the people. It was something that I enjoyed, and I needed an income, so I endured it,
as you mentioned, he has denied these allegations. There was a settlement reached with you, correct? And as part of that settlement, I believe both parties signed some kind of non-disclosure agreement, in essence saying you aren't to speak publicly about these allegations.
I wouldn't assume it's both parties.
Okay. She signed a non-disclosure agreement, correct? Yes?
Yes.
But here you are telling us your story. Are you taking a risk? Has he released you from that agreement?
No, he hasn't released, but I am taking a risk. And the reason why I'm taking a risk, it is important I want to be a voice. My ancestors, my grandmother, my mother, my daughters, my granddaughter. I want her, when she enters the workforce, long when I'm gone, I want her to not have to, endure sexism and gender inequality. And I want to stand up, and I felt it was worth the risk to stand up for all the women in the workforce that are voiceless. That ordinary women like myself with extraordinary challenges working in the workforce that are dominated by men.
And we want to see reforms in the system. I mean, it's more than just about Marion. She endured a ridiculous system. She had to scramble to find an attorney. His attorney was paid for by the taxpayers. She had to go through a cooling off period like she's a child. Her complaint to Congress was called a request for counseling, like there's some kind of mental disorder with the woman complaining about sexual harassment. So we would like to speak to the Ethics Committee and the Office of Compliance and make this a better system for everyone.
I have to leave it here, but what do you hope happens to Congressman Conyers? And do you believe he should step down, should resign?
I'm going to leave that up to the Ethics Committee and his colleagues. All I want from the congressman is for him to acknowledge what he did and apologize to me for calling me a liar.
Marion Brown, thank you for being here. Lisa, thank you as well.
Situation dealing with real life people. Look at you all. Look at you all. Don't come that close.
He always was with the ladies around my church. Everything he had to, if he put his arm around the hook people, he'll hook you. I mean, I think this is something that's crazy. Well, John is 5 years older than I am. I'm 83. John's 85, and maybe. Like me, I start retiring out of my business at a certain time. Maybe you should kind of think about it for your health's sake. I know Bishop Ellis will be up, kind of upset about this. I'm sure, because everybody thinks the world of John, the greatest temple.